There's some markets where the scene is so big you can play that many shows in the same city multiple times because, like I described before, where the greater Lafayette area includes Lafayette itself, Youngsville, Broussard, Scott, Dussault, and all the other surrounding area cities that will come into this. You can go over to Houston and you'll see this surface area in comparison to that. Houston is like 4 times the size of Lafayette. You could, on the same night, let's just say it's a Saturday night, you could have a show going on in central Houston, downtown, midtown. You can have something going on in Pasadena. You can have something going on in Baytown. You can have something going on in Katy up here. It's a very different thing. And the more your band gets out, the more that becomes apparent. Especially if you're from a smaller market like us, which we're not the smallest market in the world. Let's be real about that. Alexandria is much smaller. Not much goes on over there. And that's why their bands in the Alexandria and Greater Pineville area usually come down here or go up there to Shreveport. Because there's other places to play. That's what I'm trying to say. Get out. It's the most important thing. Why would you want to play your hometown all the time when you literally, quite literally, have the rest of the world that's not your town? That's kind of my mentality behind the whole thing. And then you look at the greater South Central Louisiana, or South Central United States region. You have like this chunk right here. That's a pretty big range. And consider that that's not even a fifth of the size of the country. We're very fortunate to be bands in this country because quite literally there is as many viable markets to hit as there are days in the year. No one would ever do that. That's insane. What I'm trying to say is that there's plenty of ground to cover in a lot of different areas. So, let's talk about riding. You want it to be a loop. So, for example, let's start plugging stuff in here. I'm also showing y'all how this works. This is a very useful tool. Corpus Christi. Just as an example. A week-long run should look relatively like this. It makes a loop. Start in Lafayette, Houston, Corpus Christi, San Antonio, Dallas, Shreveport, and then you go back to Lafayette. That is how you make a decent budgeting decision that will result in you breaking even by the end of the tour. Killed the protein bar. But that's just an example. Let's go in the opposite direction. Okay. Little Rock, not the strongest market in the world, but gotta start somewhere. It would look something like that. We made a circle. An important circle. Now keep in mind, some of these markets are hard to break into. And that's when an assload of research, communication, and flexibility comes into play. Because we are now on the routing thing. The important parts are over. You want the routes to make sense. Now we talk about date range and day range. Date range is the dates that are actually there, and the day range is the amount of dates that you can do. The more, the better. As far as actual runs, ideal is 5. A Wednesday through Sunday. But not everything is going to fall into place like that. But 5 is the easiest way to actually make a decent amount of headway as far as distance goes. Here's the flexibility part. We're going to talk about markets now. And alternative markets. When you're booking something, keep in mind things like this. This circle that I'm making right here. Mobile and Pensacola are less than an hour from each other. If one of the cities doesn't work out, reach out to the other one. And honestly, reach out to both at the same time. At that point. Another example. the greater Birmingham area is right here. But you also have Huntsville up here, and you have Tuscaloosa right here. And you have Gadsden somewhere in the mix up here. There it is. All four of those markets have shows pretty decently often. Those are things to consider. Oh, shit. So, for example, Birmingham, that's where No Cure is from. Tuscaloosa, I'm pretty sure that's where Fogcrawler and Iron Law are from. Birmingham also has Terrifier. Huntsville, I don't really remember what bands are there, but they definitely have shows there. Atlanta, like Turn Cold, as far as like the more underground, like hardcore side of stuff, that's where they're from. Yosemite and Black is from there. But that's when you start doing research. I only know these things because I've looked at them. Jackson right here, that's where Face Rot's from. So for example, one thing that I'm dealing with right now for the tour that I'm booking in right now for April. Wichita didn't work out because the promoter contact that I had moved to Texas, and none of his remaining contacts left over in the city were able to do anything with it. So we then were like, okay, what are the alternatives for that date? We looked into Ponca City right here. That's where Sanguine Flood and Grain of Honor are from. As an alternative to Wichita. And we also looked at Tulsa, which honestly is a better alternative, just logistically speaking, than Ponca City because it's a bigger city and there's more bands there. Tulsa we secured just because we're flexible enough to ask multiple places within kind of a 3-hour range. You got to do stuff like that. And then, for example, another alternative routing that I looked into instead of Wichita was Joplin. That's in Missouri. They have a few bands in there still. I'm pretty sure the biggest band out of there is Remnants, and they're still doing things lately. And then you go up here, Springfield. That's where Lindbergh's and the Den are from. That's those venues that are over there. Kansas City, that's where Howdy and Farewell are at. St. Louis, Marshmallow is a venue out there. And the Sinkhole, which is one of the ones that we're hitting in April. So yeah, however many dates you can max out, that's what you want to do. If it's 3, do 3. If it's 5, do 5. As soon as you get under 3, it's like you'd have to, in order to make any decent range, you'd have to have an entire travel day just to get out of the state and get over to somewhere else. So that's markets and alternative markets. Dallas is another example. There's a bunch of smaller areas around it. Fort Worth, Dallas proper, Denton. Garland, I don't know if they do anything